My name is Fatima. I am 28 years old and I came to Canada alone. I still remember the day I landed in Vancouver. The air was cold, sharper than I had ever felt, and it cut through the excitement I carried in my heart. I had dreams, big dreams of building a new life, of independence, and of success. But I did not know that dreams could sometimes feel like heavy, invisible burdens. Coming to Canada was not easy. I left my family, my friends, my comfort zone. I left behind the life I knew, the routines, the smells of home, the familiarity of language and culture. All I had was a suitcase, a few savings and hope. The first few weeks were the hardest. The cold in Vancouver was nothing like the winter I knew. It was damp. It crept under your clothes and into your bones. I had never experienced a cold that made you shiver even inside your apartment. Housing was my first real challenge. I had found listings online, but nothing prepared me for the scams. I was contacted by landlords who sounded professional and welcoming, only to ask for large deposits up front. I had no one to advise me. I was alone. I remember sending my first rent payment and realizing too late that the apartment didn't exist. It was heartbreaking and humiliating. I felt foolish for trusting someone I didn't know. It was the first of many lessons about being cautious, about the harsh reality of moving to a new country. Work was another mountain I had to climb. I was trained as a nurse, but Canadian regulations were strict. I had certifications, degrees, and years of experience, yet I had to start over, redo tests, take exams, wait for approvals. While waiting, I had to survive on my savings, doing odd jobs, sometimes working long hours in places far below my skill level. Each day, I reminded myself, I didn't come here to fail. I came here to build a life. But the struggle was real. The loneliness was another weight I carried. I watched families in parks, people laughing, sharing meals, while I often ate alone in my small, cold apartment. I missed my mother's cooking, my friends' jokes, my language that I could speak without effort. The days felt long, and some nights, the silence was unbearable. But slowly I started finding my rhythm. I learned to dress in layers, to prepare meals that warmed me from the inside, to navigate public transport, to meet people who were also far from home and understood my struggles. I found small jobs while waiting for my nursing license. I met other nurses who had been through the same process, and they became my guides and my friends. Even though it was hard, every little success, paying rent without losing my savings, passing a small test, making a friend, felt monumental. Each step reminded me why I had come. This city, with its rain, cold, and high prices, was also a place of opportunity, if I could endure, if I could adapt, struggling and learning. Weeks turned into months. Every day was a battle, against the cold, the bureaucracy, and sometimes against my own doubts. I finally managed to secure a small apartment in East Vancouver. It was not much, a tiny studio with a view of a brick wall and a dripping roof during the rain. But it was mine, and I reminded myself that having a place to call home was a victory, no matter how small. Financial struggles were constant. Rent in Vancouver was unforgivingly high. Sometimes I had to choose between buying groceries or paying a part of the rent. One day, I even skipped meals to make sure my landlord didn't raise suspicions about late payments. It was humiliating, but it taught me resilience. I learned to budget carefully, to cook simple meals that lasted days, to find free resources like community food banks. Meanwhile, I was preparing for my nursing exams. The process was complex. I had to take courses, pass tests, prove my English proficiency, and then wait for approvals. I spent long nights studying, often in the dark hours with only the hum of the heater as company. I doubted myself constantly. Am I really going to make it? I asked myself many times. There were moments when giving up felt easier than continuing, but each time I reminded myself of why I had come, to create a life that was mine, to honor my efforts, and to prove to myself that I could. When I finally started my first clinical placement, I realized that the work I loved could also be exhausting. Long shifts, high stress, and a foreign healthcare system tested me in every way. I encountered patients who were frightened, sick, and sometimes rude. I had to learn quickly, not just medical procedures, but also how to navigate the system, how to communicate with colleagues who spoke faster than I could understand, how to adapt my approach for cultural differences. The cold was relentless. Even during summer, Vancouver could surprise me with chilly winds and rain that soaked through every layer. Walking to my placement early in the morning, I felt my fingers go numb and my face sting. Yet, the warmth of helping a patient, of seeing someone recover or smile because of my care, made every shivering step worth it. I also faced moments of failure. There were patients I couldn't help as much as I wanted, mistakes in documentation that made me feel incompetent, and moments when my accent caused confusion with colleagues. But each failure was a lesson. I learned to slow down, double-check my work, ask for help when needed, and accept that perfection is not always possible. And slowly, there were victories, passing small tests, being recognized for my efforts by a mentor, even cooking a full meal without overspending. It all felt like progress. I was building something from scratch, not just a career, but confidence, independence, and a sense of belonging, even in a city that often felt cold and indifferent. I realized that Canada was not just a land of opportunities, it was a land of challenges that demanded resilience. I had to fight for every step, for every dollar, for every moment of peace in a new city far from home. Yet with each struggle, I became stronger, more patient, and more certain that I could survive and eventually thrive, finding my ground. After almost a year in Vancouver, I began to feel, for the first time, that I was not just surviving, I was starting to live. The long nights of uncertainty, the freezing mornings, the lonely meals, they were still there, but something inside me had shifted. I had learned the rules of the game, so to speak. I had learned which landlords were trustworthy, how to budget carefully, and how to navigate the Canadian healthcare system as a new nurse. One of the most important things I discovered was the value of community. I met other immigrants in similar situations, people who understood the unique mixture of fear, hope, and determination that comes with leaving everything familiar behind. We shared our stories, our struggles, and sometimes our tears. These friendships became lifelines. They were the warmth in the cold city, the laughter in the rain, the advice that saved me from making mistakes I had already seen others make. At work, I slowly gained confidence. Tasks that once seemed daunting became manageable. I learned to anticipate the needs of patients, to communicate clearly despite my accent, and to collaborate effectively with my colleagues. One day, a senior nurse told me, "Fatima, you've adapted so well. You're doing great." That small acknowledgement felt monumental. It was proof that I belonged here, that my effort was recognized, that I was capable. The struggles were far from over, of course. Rent was still high, and the Vancouver weather still tested me every winter. There were days when the cold seeped into my apartment and refused to leave, when the rain made me question why I had come so far from home. But I had learned to cope. I invested in better winter clothes, created a small routine that gave me structure, and found joy in small comforts: a warm cup of tea, a good book, a call with my family back home. Financially, things improved slowly. My nursing license finally came through, allowing me to work full-time at a hospital. The salary was enough to cover rent, food, and some savings. It wasn't luxurious, but it was independence. I could pay my bills without fear, buy groceries without anxiety, and even afford small treats for myself. That feeling of finally being able to support myself was liberating. I began to see my failures differently. Every mistake, every moment of doubt, every scam I had fallen for, they were all part of my journey. They taught me caution, patience, and resilience. And with that perspective, I started to embrace success even more fully. Passing exams, helping patients recover, forming friendships, finding a safe and warm apartment. All of it was evidence that I was capable of more than I had imagined. The city no longer felt as lonely. I knew the bus routes, the grocery stores, the best coffee shops. I had favorite spots where I felt comfortable. Slowly, Vancouver became less like a foreign, cold place and more like a home I had built for myself. A home that reflected my efforts, my perseverance, my courage. Through all this, I realized something profound. Being an immigrant is not just about surviving challenges. It is about creating meaning from them. Every hardship, every lonely night, every doubt, it all shaped me. I wasn't just a nurse in a new country. I was Fatima, a woman who had dared to leave everything familiar, to face the unknown, and to build a life that was wholly her own. I was still learning, still growing, still facing challenges, but now I faced them with confidence. The cold was still biting, the city still overwhelming at times, but I knew I could endure, and more importantly, I knew I could thrive, thriving and giving back. It has been 3 years since I first arrived in Vancouver. I often look back at that nervous, cold young woman stepping off the plane with nothing but a suitcase and hope. I can hardly recognize her anymore, not because the city has changed, but because I have. Now I am a full-fledged nurse, working in a hospital I once dreamed of joining. I have a stable apartment, a small circle of close friends, and routines that give my life rhythm and purpose. The cold still bites in winter, but I have learned to dress, to plan, and to enjoy the rain with a hot cup of coffee in my hand. The city no longer feels like a challenge I must survive. It feels like a canvas I can shape with my efforts. Looking back, I realize that every difficulty, every scam, every night of loneliness, every moment of fear was a lesson. I learned resilience, patience, and the power of small steps. I learned that success doesn't arrive in one giant leap. It comes in quiet, incremental victories. Paying my first full month of rent without help, passing my nursing exams, helping a patient smile after a painful procedure. All these moments built my confidence and my life. I've also learned the importance of giving back. I mentor new immigrant nurses, sharing my experiences, warning them of scams, helping them navigate the Canadian healthcare system, and reminding them that loneliness is temporary. I know the value of community because I once needed it desperately. I organize small gatherings, study sessions, and even coffee mornings where newcomers can share stories and advice. Seeing them succeed gives me as much joy as my own achievements. If I could give advice to anyone coming to Canada alone, I would say, 1. Be patient with yourself. Nothing happens overnight. Every step, no matter how small, counts. 2. Do your research before signing any lease. Scams are everywhere, and it's easy to feel desperate and trust the wrong people. 3. Build a support network. Find friends, mentors, or community groups. You are not alone, even if it feels that way at first. 5. Embrace failure as a teacher. Every mistake is a lesson in resilience, caution, and patience. 6. Celebrate every victory. From passing a test to cooking your first meal independently, acknowledge your progress. 7. Keep your dream alive. Remind yourself why you came, especially on the hardest days. Motivation fades if you forget your purpose. Canada taught me more than I expected. It was harsh at times, overwhelming at times, and lonely at times, but it also gave me the space to grow, to find strength I didn't know I had, and to build a life that is entirely mine. I am Fatima, a woman who came alone, faced challenges that seemed impossible, and emerged not just surviving, but thriving. And for anyone following in my footsteps, the journey is tough, yes, but every hardship can become a stepping stone, every lonely moment a lesson, and every small success a reason to keep moving forward. Your life here is what you make of it, and if I can do it, so can you. Don't forget to subscribe to get all the stories and learn English through real-life experiences.